Well, I'm joined now by the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Rishi Sunak. Mr. Sunak, many thanks indeed for joining us this morning. I do want to get your thoughts on Labour spending plans in a moment, but first I'd like to get your reaction to the flooding that we've seen in parts of the north of England and the East Midlands. I know your constituency isn't a million miles away. Do you think there will be a national emergency declared by the Prime Minister, because a number of homes and businesses have been affected?
Well, you're right. The Prime Minister's chairing a COBRA meeting later today to tackle the awful flooding we've seen. And you're right, my own constituency actually suffered some very devastating flooding earlier this summer. So I experienced this firsthand with my constituents in the Yorkshire Dales. And I know at the time, both the Prime Minister and the government were very keen to respond strongly to that. There's something called the Bellwin scheme that reimburses local authorities for the immediate costs of clean-up and response. There's a farming recovery fund that was set up to help farmers in my area and others in previous floods. So I know this is something that the Prime Minister personally takes an enormous interest in. We've seen him visit previous places as well. He spoke to me personally at the time of flooding in my own constituency, and I know he'll be determined to make sure we respond appropriately later today.
A number of flood warnings are still in place. I mean, what reassurances can you give to those communities that they will get the support that they need?
Well, I think the Prime Minister's been very clear. I think the emergency services deserve enormous credit for the work that they've been doing already in the ground. Obviously, people should follow the notices. As you said, there are ongoing notices in place. So it's right people take note of those. And the Prime Minister will be chairing, as I said, a COBRA meeting today, and more news will emerge after that.
I'd like to talk about politics now. I mean, yesterday we saw that screeching U-turn from Nigel Farage and the Brexit Party. His party won't be contesting more than 300 seats. Does that help or hinder the Conservative Party as we go into this general election?
I'm glad that Nigel Farage has realised that, for those who want to see the referendum result respected and Brexit delivered, the only way to achieve that outcome is with a Conservative majority government. That's something that we've been saying for a while, and I'm delighted that he realises that. And I hope anyone around the country who wants to see the result now respected, wants us to move on from Brexit, end the delay, move on to talk about other things. The only way to get that is by voting for a majority Conservative government.
Are you concerned that this might backfire because there'll be many people in Conservative seats who Nigel Farage and his brand of politics will be toxic?
No, I don't think that. I think most people across the country, regardless of how they voted in the referendum, they believe that the result should be respected. They would like to see us focus on other things like the NHS, schools and policing. They realise the only way to achieve that is with a Conservative majority government. And beyond Brexit, I think people are excited and attracted by that agenda that we've laid out. It's about unleashing Britain's potential, making sure that every part of our economy is prospering, every part of our country shares in our opportunity. The Prime Minister's talked about levelling up across the UK, and then focus on public services, the NHS, schools and police. I think that's a positive agenda. People want to get us onto that, and the only way to do that is with a majority Conservative government that gets Brexit done, as I said, by the end of January, okay. And then we can get onto those other things.
It is interesting that the Labour Party seems to be capitalising on this fact. I mean, they seem to suggest that a pact has been made between Nigel Farage and either the Prime Minister or somebody in the Conservative Party or government. Has there been any dealings, any talks between Nigel Farage or any of his associates with the Prime Minister or members of the Conservative Party or members of the government?
I mean, I'm certainly not aware of any. I think the Prime Minister was pretty clear when he was asked about that yesterday. And I said the only pacts and deals that people should be worried about, as we're hearing about the Labour Party and the SNP and Nicola Sturgeon saying that the price for her support would be not only another referendum next year, so we'd have to have 2 referendums with the Labour Party, more delay, but also that they'd want us to abandon our nuclear deterrent that keeps us safe. I think that's the kind of pact that people ought to be worried about. We're getting on with our message. We can get Brexit done and we can move on to everything else. Okay. And that's something that I think people are resonating with.
But Mr. Sunak, you can understand somebody's concern if they believe themselves to be a traditional Conservative Party member. They've always voted for your party, but they voted to remain in the 2016 referendum. And for them, it will feel like the Conservative Party have now gone into a pact with the Brexit Party. This is something that we heard Donald Trump talk about a few weeks ago. It doesn't look good for your party.
No, I don't think that's right at all. We haven't made any deals with anybody. All we've done is a consistent message that we've laid out that we want to get Brexit done. And whether you voted Remain or Leave, most people I speak to believe that the result should be respected. They're fed up with the delay and indecision that they've seen for the last few years. They realise that the only way to break that deadlock is to vote for a majority Conservative government that will, yes, get Brexit done, and that's important, but then move on to these other things, the NHS, schools, police, making sure we can introduce a new points-based immigration system in contrast to the uncontrolled and unlimited immigration policies we're hearing from the Labour Party. Those are the priorities people want. The only way to get that is with a majority Conservative government. I think people get that, and they're keen to see that happen.
And on the Labour Party and its spending plan, I mean, I've been looking at the press release that was released by your party. It does, in many ways, seems to be a rehash of what was released over the course of the weekend.
No, it's actually a move on from that. What it shows is that Labour's reckless spending plans, the £1.2 trillion, when you work through their own fiscal rules, what that would imply is that ordinary taxpayers in this country would face an additional bill of £2,400 every year to pay for those extreme and reckless spending plans.
But how do you know that is Labour's spending plans? They haven't released their manifesto yet.
That's the average month's pay for someone working in this country.
But we don't know for sure that this is the Labour Party's spending plans. They haven't yet released their manifesto. So they've got a point where they come out and say, look, this is all fake news.
No, not at all. I mean, starting point is the 2017 manifesto, and nothing that they've said publicly says that they've walked away from any of those commitments. And then we've gone through and looked at all the other commitments that they've made since that time, official press releases from the Labour Party, policies that they've passed at their own conference, which their own rulebook says then become part of their party's policy platform. We've taken a reasonable approach to costing them. And by the way, there's lots of things we haven't even put in there and we've underestimated to be on the side of caution. When you do all of that, you plug it through their fiscal rules, you end up with a bill for average workers in this country of £2,400 every year. It's the shocking cost of Corbyn's reckless spending plans.
And what is the bill to the country that your spending pledges are going to cost?
We've been very clear. We do not think we should be borrowing for day-to-day spending. Under the current forecast provided by the independent OBR, there's about a £30 billion surplus over what we take in, over what we spend. We've spent about £13.5 billion of that on priorities like the NHS, schools and police. We did that recently before Parliament broke up. So there's sufficient headroom in there. Beyond that, we've said that we will responsibly invest in long-term infrastructure, and crucially, debt at the end of the Parliament under a Conservative government will be lower as a share of GDP than it is today. That is absolutely not the case for the Labour plans, where debt will be spiralling out of control, and as independent forecasters have said, it's levels of borrowing that are wholly unprecedented order of magnitude.
Okay, Rishi Sunak, appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.